your bachelor's was in industrial engineering, and then you did a PhD in management of technology and innovation. You told me that there was a big emphasis on decision science within this, and your thesis was titled "How to Identify and Unlock Inherent Potential Within Organizations and Individuals." And so the first question is, what was the core point that you were making in your thesis that had that title?
So when I had this life goal very early on that I mentioned of helping others identify and unlock inherent potential. So that requires a belief or an assumption that there's already potential there. You just need to find it. It's invisible, right? But it's inherent. You need to find it. What I soon discovered was that really what's holding us back is not our starting conditions, but our starting assumptions. Whether you believe you can do something or can't, you're right. So I had a really interesting experience very early on in my life where I realized that whether you believe you can do something or can't makes a profound difference, because at least it will get you to try. So then I read Dr. Goldratt's book, The Goal, and already in the foreword of The Goal, he hooked me, because what he had done is he had verbalized it, at least in my understanding, the simplest formulation of the scientific method. He said, if you want to make a breakthrough in any field that you are interested in, it just requires 2 steps. Step number 1 is have the courage to face an inconsistency. So an inconsistency is simply an expectation gap, right? Our current performance is, it takes us 4 weeks to get this thing done, but the actual work time is only 4 days. Like, why is there such a big gap? When I place an order for a computer and they quote me 4 weeks, and I know it takes them a couple of hours to assemble the computer, or I order a passport from the government agency and they quote me 3 months when I know it's probably a couple of minutes to get a passport right? Or I know my bottleneck is capable of doing 20 a day, but the system is only doing 5 a day. Like, that's an inconsistency. There's an expectation gap. But then he said the second question is that, or the second step is, have the courage to challenge basic assumptions. So imagine there's this expectation gap, right? How do we cope as human beings with this expectation gap? We basically do 2 things, neither of which is very useful. The first one is we find someone or someone to blame for the expectation gap, right? This is kind of the midlife crisis, right? Suddenly you realize midlife, you haven't achieved anywhere towards your goals. You've promised all your friends you're going to be retiring by the age of 40, and you're nowhere close to retiring. And now you have to find someone or something to blame. So you blame your family. If I didn't have a wife and kids, or a husband and kids, I could have done so much more if it wasn't for the government. It kind of relieves the suffering, but it's not that useful. The second way of coping with an expectation gap is we start lowering our expectations. And to some degree, that's even more devastating. So what Goldratt did was he challenged us to challenge the assumptions on which our actions are based to realize that expectation. And as soon as I read that, I thought, okay, finding expectation gaps are pretty easy. You walk into any environment, and I still do that today. If I go into a mining environment, I know nothing about mining. How do I know it's possible to do much more? I ask them, what's your best day? What's your average day? And normally the gap is 50%, right? And the same with time. Like, what's the fastest you've ever done it? How long does it normally take you? The gap is at least 50%. So that part, step 1 of having the courage to face an inconsistency, is not that difficult. Knowing what assumptions to challenge is the difficult part. And that's what I decided to do my PhD on, is I asked myself, is it possible to come up with a systematic process, step-by-step process, that can take any group or any individual through the process of helping them discover their own limiting assumption or belief, and finding practical ways of challenging and overcoming that. And that's what I ended up doing my PhD on. I first tested it in the private sector. We had a 5-day workshop. We then tested it in a public sector, with for-purpose organizations. And then finally, we tested it with individuals. And the outcome of that is I developed a new process. It's kind of similar to the pro-con list that was developed by Benjamin Franklin on how to make decisions, but it's called the Pro-Con Cloud method, consists of 5 steps. And we've embedded that into an app called the Harmony Decision Maker app. And if you go through those 5 steps related to any major problem that you're facing or any decision conflict you have, you are guaranteed to make a breakthrough, because in every step has been designed to help you to uncover and overcome a common decision mistake or limiting assumption or belief. So that's what I ended up doing my PhD on.